In this video, I'll show you how to use some common Java Swing components like the JFrame, the JLabel, JTextField, and JCheckbox components. I'll also show you how to quickly put these together with a simple flow layout manager so that your elements move and size appropriately to your screen. And finally, I'm going to demonstrate how to listen for events clicked on your checkboxes, enabling you to perform some easy calculations. I'll see you guys in a moment. Okay, so some key concepts we're going to look at in this video concern these items which all extend from component. And these are the JFrame, the JLabel, the JTextField, and JCheckbox. And of course, many others do as well. But this means that we can use all of these with our layout manager. The layout manager we're going to be using is the Flow Layout Manager. According to the Java doc, a flow layout arranges components in a directional flow, much like lines of text in a paragraph. The flow direction is determined by the container's component orientation property. And it may be one of two values, left to right or right to left. We're also going to be using an item listener. And our class will actually implement the item listener. It's going to overwrite the item state changed method, and we'll add this to our class as a listener for our checkboxes to use. Good afternoon, class. In this video, I'm going to walk you through how to do week 15 assignment 27 exercise and what's due for this week. This is not a hard project, but because we haven't had a lot of experience using GUI, there's a lot of new elements. And so I wanted to create a video for you to follow along and do this with me. So what I want you to do is go ahead and open up IntelliJ. We're going to create a new project. And with our project, make sure you just select just Java and click Next. And don't select Create Project from Template. We'll keep it blank. Click Next. And we're going to call this project our J Resort Calculator. And click Finish. Once you have that done, the project window will open. You'll come over here to the project in the tree, click on Source, click on New, go to Class, and we'll call this again J Resort Calculator. When you're programming with Java Swing gives you a lot of graphical user interface functionality that you normally don't have the opportunity to use. Now, you may have used the J option panel a few times, but with Java Swing, it actually gives you a real look and feel application like what we have here. So for this application, what I want you to do, we're going to, we have to gather certain things, and every Java Swing application needs to have a frame. So for ours, we're actually going to extend from a JFrame, which is our key piece that we'll need. And if you extend from JFrame and you type that in, IntelliJ should create the import for you. If it has not, then please type import javax.swing at the top there, what you see. All right, now we need to implement a listener. And the listeners in Java Swing are things that listen for keyboard actions. They listen for mouse clicks. They listen for things like you checking off certain buttons on the screen, or if you're accessing a J text area, and so forth. So we're going to implement an item listener. And when we do, it's going to tell us basically that we have to implement those abstract methods. So if you see the little red bulb up here, click on Implements Methods, and we're going to implement the item state change methods. We'll go and click on that. Now this is something that we'll have to fill out as we go on. So I'm going to change this from E to event so it makes it a little bit more readable for us. Okay, at this point, we're going to create a couple of constants. So we're going to create a constant called final int base price, because we're creating a resort calculator. So we're thinking about what types of packages you may have at a resort, right? So the base price is going to be $200. Then we're going to create another constant, and we'll call it final int weekend premium, and this will equal $100. We'll create another one. We'll call it final int breakfast premium, and this will equal $20. And we'll create a final one, final int golf premium, and we'll say $75. And then our last variable we're going to create in this area is going to be an int total price. And we're going to initialize our total price to the base price. All right, so we have some constants created. Now we need to create the checkboxes. And let's see, I need to fix that total price. All right, so now we need to create some J checkboxes. So we'll type J checkbox, hit enter, and that should automatically make those available at the top. And then we'll call this the weekend box. This equals a new J checkbox. We're going to supply a label using a string literal, and we'll say this is the weekend premium. And we're going to put inside of this a $sign. Okay, and then we'll say plus weekend premium, and we're going to supply false here. Now, if we drill into this and we look at what the J checkbox constructor gives us, the method here, not constructor, the method, we'll see that this is the string of the text box, and the Boolean value selected determines if what the initial selection state is. And so in our instance, we're saying it's going to be not selected. All right, so we'll go on to the next one. We'll say J checkbox. We'll call this one our breakfast box, and this will equal a new J checkbox. Again, we're going to supply a string literal, and we'll say breakfast and $sign and plus the breakfast premium. And again, this one is false. It's not selected. What I mean by selected is that when you see a checkbox and you see a check in it, that means it's selected. And so by saying these are not selected, we're ensuring that when the application loads, the checkbox is not already pre-checked. All right, one last checkbox. We're going to create J checkbox. We'll call this a golf box. This equals a new J checkbox. Again, we're going to supply a string literal, and we'll call this golf $sign, and we're going to add the golf premium. And again, we're not going to have this initialized to be checked. Okay, we got our checkboxes in place. Now we need to kind of set up some other values like our resort label, our price label, option explain label, and a secondary option explain label. So let's create our first J label. Okay, again, these are very straightforward. Everything in Swing is appended with a J for Java. So you have J checkbox, J label, J frame, and so forth. So we'll call this our resort label. This equals new, and this is a J label. Okay. Now our J label, we're going to supply it with a string literal, and we'll call this our resort price calculator. This is going to be something that sets at the top of the screen to kind of explain what we're doing. All right, let's create another J label. Call this one J label price label. New J label. And this is supplied with a string literal again, the price for your stay is. Okay. And now we're going to create a JText box. You have several options here. You have JText area. A text area is what you would have seen in your HTML class. It's allows you to type in a lot of text. A text field is more limited. It's designed for things like names and dates or whatnot. All right, so we're going to use JText field, and we'll call this our total price equals new JText field, and we're going to set the length for this to be 4. All right, so let's drill into this so you can kind of get an idea of what's happening there. This is the number of columns. So this calculates the preferred width. This is different than size. So with preferred width, this is saying the visibility of the text area on the screen, the JText field on the screen. This is not the same as the number of characters allowed. All right, so we'll come back over here, and it is complaining because total price has already been used. Well, where's total price been used? It's been used there. So let's just total price field. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to go on, and we need to create 2 more labels, and we'll call this one a J label. Option explain label, and we'll say this equals new J label. We're going to supply this with a string literal that says base price for a room is, and we're going to give the base price constant we selected earlier. I'm going to append that to the end with a period. Okay, and one last J label, and this is going to be option explain label 2, new J label, and we'll call this check the options you want. All right, we've created most of our assets we need for this project now. So we need to do a couple more things. Let's go ahead and create a constructor, and our constructor is just going to be public J resort calculator, and in our constructor we're going to say super because we're calling on the JFrame constructor. And if we click on this, we can see that its constructor, where is it at? There's a constructor here, and then there's a constructor there. graphics configuration, right? We have another constructor here with the title. Okay, so we're using that constructor in the J-frame, and we're going to pass in a title, and we're saying resort price estimator. And then we're going to set the default close operation. And what this means is what we want to happen when you click the little X button in Windows for an application. On the window there, we want to set what happens to the operation when you click that. And so we're going to say JFrame, and we're going to pass in this option, right? And so here, if we click on this, we'll see that this passes in an int of 3. And if we click on the set default operation, this is a method we get for free out of the JFrame because we extended from it. If we click into that, we can see that if we pass in a number 3, that it's going to do something. It's going to, if the operation is whatever, right? So if the operation is exit on close, we're going to call the security manager, and it's going to do some stuff, and it's going to close. It's going to close the application. So that's what we're doing there. We're making sure that if you click on that little button, it closes the application. All right, then we're going to set the layout. Now, if you try to do this assignment without first reading the text or going through a lot of the course book, this is not going to make sense. But our layout manager here is a flow layout. And what that means is as we drag and resize our JFrame, our application when it's running, the fields will flow in and out, will move around automatically for us. Your discussion question this week is actually research and find other layout managers that you can use, because there's more than just what we're using here. All right, so we're going to add now to our JFrame. We're going to add, and the add method here, it takes a component, a string component or component int, component object, so forth. So we're going to add our components. And JLabel is a component. As you can see, it extends component, it implements swing constants and accessible. So it lies in the area of things that we can add. So we're going to add first our resort label. Then we're going to add our options explain label. And remember, because this is using the flow layout manager, as we add them, it's going to start at the top of the screen of your application and add the elements down. And the flow layout manager is just going to stack them. And if there's more space to the right, it'll move it up to the same line. If there isn't, it brings it back down. All right, so we're going to add our option explainable to. We're going to add our weekend box. We're going to add our breakfast box. We're going to add our golf box. We're going to add our price label box. We're going to add our total price field text area. Okay. Now we've set all those up, so now we need to do a little bit more work here. Let's go to our total price, and we're going to set, our total price field, and we're going to call a method called setText. And what this does is it's pre-initializing that JText area that when it loads, it's going to contain a certain amount of text. We're going to say $sign and plus the total price. Okay, what was total price? Total price was initialized up here, right? So it's already set. All right, so total price. Now we're going to add to the weekend box, and we're going to say add an item listener. And we're adding this, which is the JFrame class, right? So if we click on the item, add item listener, and look at that, it says that we're adding an item listener to the item listener of this class, to the checkbox. Okay, so to the checkbox, adding an item listener. And what the item listener does is it allows you to hear, per se, to know if there's been a check because it's watching it. And we're adding this, which is JResort Calculator. And how can we add this? Well, because this class implements item listener. So we can add to the weekend box a reference to itself, right? A reference to the class. All right, hope that makes sense. Breakfast box, add item listener. Again, this because our class implements item listener. We have golf box, add item listener, adding this, and we're done. Now, if you remember when we implemented item listener, we had to override, we have to implement, right, this item state changed. And so right now it's not going to do anything. It's just going to, there's no logic in it for anything to happen. This method is stubbed out so that when you do this, it's going to cause something to happen. Let me give you an example. If I type SOUT and I say, I have been clicked. Because I've added a reference to the item listener that we extend to the weekend box, the breakfast box, and the golf box, every time I click on these, this method is going to be called and that's going to be outputted. Okay. We could leave that in there for a moment. For your class assignment, please take that out. All right. So now we need to think about the logic. All right. What are we going to do here? Well, we need to take the event that occurs and we need to get the source. Because when we click on this item listener and we're registering this class, this method is going to be called and we need to know which box we've clicked on. So we're going to say event, get the source, who clicked on me. And we're just going to initialize this to an object, a source. Okay. And then we're going to say event get state change. And this is going to give us a number. If we drill into that, we'll see that it gives us an int. Returns the type of state change, selected or deselected, an integer that indicates whether it was selected or deselected. Okay, so it's going to return one of those. I believe probably a 1 or a 0. So we're going to initialize this and we'll say int select. All right, so we have two pieces of information here. So let's interrogate. Let's set up our logic. If our source is equivalent to weekend box, well, if it's equivalent to weekend box, what do we want to do? If the event occurs on the weekend box, we need to do something. Well, the first thing we need to do is determine if the state is selected or not selected. So let's ask the question. If select, which is our value up here, if this is, then we're going to ask the question, is item event, and we're going to use their constant for selected. And you can see selected is 0. And if we were to look at the other constants, deselected is 2. So selected is 1, deselected is 2. All right, so that makes sense. So when we click on an item, it's going to call this method. It's going to get the source, who clicked on it, and what the state is. And If it's a weekend box, we're going to say if the item was selected, we want to do something. Well, if the item is selected, we want to set the total price to plus equal the weekend premium. Yeah. Else, we want the total price to minus equal the weekend premium. And it's basically saying if it's a number 2 deselected, then we're going to subtract that price. If it is selected, we're going to add that price. All right, so let's go on to the next one. That handles our weekend box. Well, what about our breakfast box? So let's see here. If the source equals breakfast box, now we need to ask the same question again. So I'm just going to copy the code here, but we don't want to add weekend box or weekend premium here. We want to use the breakfast premium, right? So if the source is breakfast box and if the item is selected, then we add that. If it's not, then we subtract it. And then finally, this is our default method, right? I'm going to put a comment up here. If none of these others, if none of the above, then this is the default, right? All right, so we're in our if else here, and we're basically saying if it's not a weekend, if it's not breakfast, and something was clicked, so what was it? Well, it's most likely a golf box. And you could write that up there and check it, but we're just going to leave it as else for right now. So we'll say select equals, let's see, equivalent to the item selected. And again, we could just copy this because no need for us to keep typing. And we're going to change this to the golf premium. Golf premium. And then we need to do one final thing, okay? We need to set our text field value to the total price. So total price text field needs to, we need to set the price. So we do that by set text, call the $ plus, and we're going to do the total price. Okay, we're getting somewhere. But just like any application, we have to have a caller, and we don't have a public static void main method. So let's put it here at the bottom, PSVM tab. And we need to initialize the object that we're calling. So we're going to say J resort calculator. I'm going to call it my resort calculator equals new J resort calculator. And I want you to notice something up here, that we have this J resort calculator that when we call it, it automatically does all of these things, right? We call that constructor, so it's doing all of those things. But we need to set some other parameters here. So let's do a final int width. We'll say 300. Final int height, and we'll set this to 200. And then we need to set our resort calculator size. So we're going to say resort calculator set size, and we'll pass in our width and our height. And then we need to say, hey, make our resort calculator visible. So we're going to set it to visible, and we'll say true. Okay, this is a very straightforward assignment. I've covered all the bases for you in doing it for you. Okay, now you could extend this a little bit further. You could add some other prices to it and make this go a whole lot longer. Okay, So let's run it and test it. So I'm just going to click on the public static void inside of my IntelliJ. We'll just click on the run method here. We'll run it, and it will build it and run it. There it is. It ran the application. So let's add a golf. Hey, 275. But you'll also notice I didn't take out my system out print line, so it's still. I've been clicked, I've been clicked, I've been clicked, I've been clicked, right? And as we click on things, it increments the price automatically. If I unclick on something, it takes out that price, right? And there you go. There's our resort price calculator.